They were the heroes from the future. Teenagers protecting the universe from those that would sow the seeds of chaos. Each had unique powers and abilities, and though they often had their differences, they came together to save the day as the Legion of Superheroes. Now you can be a part of their adventures and learn the history of the future in the Legion Clubhouse.
Matthew, I think this week's installment of the Legion Clubhouse introduces us to another one of the Legion's greatest adversaries, Mordru the Edgelord.
No, Mordru the Dark Lord. Dark Lord.
No. Well, that doesn't sound as interesting.
No, not really.
Superboy number 147, The Origin of the Legion. Published May-June 1968. Written by E. Nelson Bridwell with art by Pete Costanza. Revealed for the first time the secrets behind the formation of the galaxy's greatest super team.
Here's something that I find very interesting. The Legion of Superheroes grew so fast and so big that they forced Superman out of his own Adventure Comics book and have taken it over. And as we find out this week, Matthew, they're so popular that they're forcing Superboy out of his own book, Superboy 147.
Well, the irony is they will eventually force Superboy out of his own book for real. But yeah, Superboy 147 is in fact an all-Legion issue. And this is fascinating to me. Almost 10 years to the day from the debut of the Legion, February 27th, 1958 was the street date for Adventure 247.
Uh-huh.
This book was on the spans March 14th, 1968.
Okay, so only just a couple of weeks off. But it's interesting that it's, for us, it's only 46 episodes of the Legion of Superheroes. Right. But for comic readers of the 1960s and the 50s, it's 10 years. It's been a decade of the Legion of Superheroes.
And after that decade, we finally, in Superboy 147, get to read the origin of the Legion of Superheroes.
Which, I know this story. This is when the reboot happens with the Archie Legion in the 90s. This is how they started off. They don't just say, hey, there's a Legion of Superheroes, let's travel back in time and meet Superboy, because they couldn't do that at that time. Tee-hee, lawsuits, bah-ha-ha. So they just had to retell the story of how do we form a Legion of Superheroes. And this is a fascinating tale. This is one where we get to meet one Lightning Lad, one Garth Rands, who's heading off to go find his long-lost brother.
Yeah, I'm going to find Mech. Bye.
And as he boards this space shuttle flight to wherever, to Earth, he bumps into Rock Kryn from the planet of Brawl. And he says, hey, we Brawlians are considered a grown-up set 14. So, if you need some liquor, you just come to me, your man Rock.
And Rock, I like the fact that Rock's basically his motivation here is I'm looking to cash in. I want to make some money with my magnetic powers.
Which, he probably could. He could be probably really good in construction.
Yeah, he could be really good in construction. I know that Magno Ball has been referenced at least once.
Oh, yeah. So maybe he's going to be a professional Magno Ball player.
That's what they actually did in the reboot that you were referring to earlier. He was going to Earth to become a professional Magno Ball player.
Mm-hmm. And so if Rock is going to tell his origin story, then, of course, Garth has to tell his story about how he, his sister, and his older brother, this is cemented in concrete now. There were 3 of them that were on the planet Korbal when they were attacked by the lightning monsters of Korbal.
Yes. This is Rand's origin, scene 1, take 7. And the Korbalian monsters no longer have big, giant unicorn horns on their heads, but now they have trunks.
Yeah.
The trunks are more pronounced. I think we've seen the trunks before, but...
Yes, shorter trunks.
Yeah, these are definitely trunks, and they're big, bug-eyed, freaky monsters, and they're like, we have zapped them, and now they have powers.
And then, of course, getting on the shuttle is one R.J. Brand, the richest man in the universe.
What's he doing on what's he writing coach for?
No, I think he's moving his way from coach up to first class.
You think he just walks through? Don't they load first class and then you pass through first class and go back to coach?
Yeah, that way you have to look at all of the people in first class and go, oh my gosh. But no, this is a power move by R.G. Brand. He's just like, nope, this is me walking up to the front. Hello, everyone. I'm the richest man in the world. And following close behind is Hubba Hubba. Get a load of this blonde. Who we don't even know who she is yet. She doesn't sit down next to him and strike up a conversation and say, "Hi, I'm Saturn Girl from the planet Saturn, and here's my superpower."
Nope. Instead, she sits down somewhere, and suddenly she says, "Those men are reaching for guns."
Yes, as they're getting off, there are a couple of guys who are reaching into their pockets for guns and pointing them at R.J. Brand, at which point Cosmic Boy and Lightning Lad go into power, and they zip and whip and flip and zip their the guns out of the bad guy's hands. They tackle him down, and then, of course, Saturn Girl is like, "I'm going to put them under a spell so that they can be calm as the police arrest them." Mm-hmm. And that's a great origin story.
It really is pretty solid. And I do like the fact that we get the old electromagnetic 1-2, but Imra is important to the story.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Because if it weren't for her, the boys wouldn't have known what to do. And at the end, we wouldn't have known why they were attacking strange people.
Right.
But this also, this kind of deepens the mystery of early Legion chronology, because R.J. Brand calls them and says, "Hey, you guys remember Superboy and Supergirl? You guys are going to be inspired by them. You're going to be a new group of superheroes for the 30th century." And of course, if you'll remember, the very first edition of the Legion was them inducting Superboy. And the question of who was there and who wasn't there is one that it just makes my brain hurt.
Oh, but it is kind of spelled out in this issue, because the heroes get their costumes. They get their super names picked by a computer.
Yeah, the computer is like, "Hey, you know who should be able to be your leader? Cosmic Boy." And I'm like, what's with the computer, dude? What happened to the planetary chance machine?
Well, that hadn't been invented yet. Remember, this is the origin. And as these three heroes are sitting around their clubhouse having a conversation, they come up with the very first rule for the Legion, where each year a leader will be chosen in a manner to be determined by the members. Planet getting thrown at your head. And then they go on a campaign to say, "Hey, we are looking for new people who have extraordinary powers." And the first one that we are introduced to is Triplicate Girl. She's the next one to be signed up. Then Phantom Girl. And then, as we see Karate Kid at the very last panel, we get Triplicate Girl and we get Phantom Girl to show up. And then all of a sudden it's like, let's smash cut to the very end and let you guys figure out what the order was for everyone else.
Well, I think that the main part here is that we've never seen Phantom and Triplicate Girls join. Mm-hmm. Triplicate Girl and Phantom Girl first showed up in that third Legion story back in Action 276. I want to say Action 276, where it was Supergirl's three Supergirl friends. They were already established as having been with the team. Everybody after that, we see join.
Right.
We see Mon-El, Colossal Boy, Element Lad, Shrinking Violet, Brainiac 5, Chameleon Boy, Phantom Girl, Light Lass, Ultra Boy, Invisible Kid, Matter Eater Lad, Bouncing Boy, Speed Boy, Irwin Boy, Boy Girl, Girl Boy, and
finally Karate Kid and the Wolfman.
And the Wolfman. Don't forget the Wolfman. Teen Wolf joined for a while there.
So this is a very, very short story. But I love this fact that we are building on a kind of something that was passing like maybe 6 or 7 issues ago, where R.J. Brand is, they're like, "Oh, the United Planets is against us." This was when everyone was being brainwashed and they had to go see their boss, R.J. Brand. And so we're introduced to this character. And now, 6 months, a year, 2 years later, now finally we're getting this origin story of R.J. Brand going, "Hey, you kids saved my life. I'm going to reward you by making you heroes, and I'm going to bankroll you. I can only afford this stupid upside down rocket ship, but you guys go out and do some hero stuff."
Stupid upside down rocket ship.
Yeah.
And, I feel like in 1968, 8 pages isn't as short as we think it is.
No, and I want to bring that up here in just a little bit later. But go on.
When we get to this Legion origin, I feel like it's very solidly Silver Age storytelling, and it gets everything done. It gets it out of the way. It's, meat and potatoes on the table.
Yes.
It's dad in a big red car and mom with a poofy haircut and pearls. This is literally exactly what the Legion needs. It's that establishing moment, that missing building block, without going too far into, characterizations that might have changed or dealing. There are still a couple of anachronisms, because you may remember back in Adventure 247, Garth was Lightning Boy.
Right.
Whereas here, he clearly chooses or is given the name Lightning Lad at the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, there's stuff in here where you can go, oh, well, if you're reading it as the letter of the story, something changed. And I'm like, you know what? It's early installment weirdness. Deal with it. You're fine.
Here's the other thing that's really great about this. This is written by E. Nelson Bridwell and with art by Pete Costanza. And I find that
Bridwell not 5 episodes ago.
I know, but here's what's good about this. And the reason why I mocked Bridwell 5 episodes ago was because he was stuck in some pre-1960s idea of what fantasy was about.
Right.
But here, if you're telling the origin story of a team that's been around for 10 years, you kind of want somebody who's stuck in the past. And so when we get Costanza and Bridwell teaming up, we get a story that feels like that it's a 10-year-old story.
It feels like the story from 1958.
Yeah. And
I agree with you on that.
And if had this been Jim Shooter and Kurt Swan, that is not the feeling this story would have been. And it probably would have been told via flashback as opposed to just, here it is, real time, you're in this 10 years ago. And I think this combination of Bridwell and Costanza doing their old guy shtick with these teenagers that look like old people really, really works and really makes it fitting for this origin story.
I can see that. Now, this is the thing, though. You keep saying E. Nelson Bridwell's old guy shtick. In 1930 or 1968, Nelson Bridwell was like 35 years old.
Yeah, but he's one of those old souls, right? He was a merry old soul. Yeah. So here's the other thing. It must have been maybe 10 issues ago, like 4 or 5 Legion Clubhouse episodes ago. We saw the Superboy backup story disappear from Adventure Comics.
Correct.
Because the Legion stories were just taking up too much space, and the Superboy backup stories in Adventure Comics were reprints. Mm-hmm. Here we get an 80-page giant, which I don't know when 80-page giants started, but 80 pages of comics for 25 cents. This is something that I would have definitely been looking for, because this would have been the best bang for the buck, because you get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stories of the Legion of Superheroes in one book.
Yeah. The 80-page giants came about around 1963 or 64.
Okay.
And it was basically a way to give kids a little extra bang for their buck and use DC's huge backstock. This is the point where people started realizing that these old stories might be interesting to people.
Well, and especially in the way that they do it here. So all of the stories that we get in this, or I'm pretty sure all of the stories that we get in here, the boy with the ultra powers, the Legion of Super Traders, Supergirl's 3 super girlfriends, the secret of the 7th superhero, and the Legion of Super Villains, I'm pretty sure that these were all 8-page stories in their original printing, or close to the 8-page stories.
Yes, and it's a really solid choice of reprints. We get the origin of the Legion. We get the origin of Ultra Boy. Mm-hmm. We get the first Legion of Super Pets. We get the first Triplicate and Phantom Girl in that 3 Super Girlfriends story.
Right.
We get Supergirl almost joining, but not. Haha.
And getting to meet her boyfriend for the first time.
Right. You get your first Sun Boy, and then you get that first Legion of Super Villains. It's a really solid set of flashbacks.
It really is.
A really good chunk.
And for someone who hasn't been, if you're a new reader, let's say you're a 10-year-old in 1968, and you're like, man, I sure wish I could read some of those classic Legion stories, because my mom threw everything away, threw all my older brother or my older sister's comics away. Right. There's a chance for you to go back and read some of these things that today people kind of scoff at, or, if you get them, you have to buy them in a giant omnibus edition, like the recent Silver Age Legion Clubhouse book that came out that was like $100, or you do like I do a few years ago and you buy the phone books, the essentials or the classic reprints, the black and white on the cheap paper phone book stuff. But here you get them in color, you get them for 25 cents, and you get like 8 tales, and they're 8 really tight tales of all of these characters, and I think it works. And of course, you got Lex Luthor doing his Lex Luthor thing.
Yeah, I am Lex Luthor, and I have no hair. Yes, and you do get to see things like the Adult Legion for the first time, which I think is a really interesting concept that at this point is starting to go by the wayside. I mean, the Adult Legion, that big Adult Legion story, wasn't all that long ago, but we haven't seen the adult Legion. We saw 5 or 6 of them in the space of 2 or 3 years, and then they just started disappearing.
We'll get back to the adult Legion, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, there's more adult Legion, but
also,
actually I want to say it goes into the 80s if you look at it right.
Also, we get forced once again to encounter Marla.
Marla Latham.
Yep.
Bald guy dressed like Ultra Boy.
Yep.
You know, I'm really fine with that. I like the fact that Marla feels like he can get down verbally with the children.
Yeah, what does that mean? Hello, young teenagers.
Hello, fellow kids.
Yeah, that's kind of how Marla feels to me.
That is exactly what Marla Latham is doing in his little Ultra Boy costume. And, you know, that's fine. If you were 64 years old, he's probably 45. If you were 64 years old, you too would want to dress like Ultra Boy and hang around with.
Here's what I want to see. Somebody out there, one of our listeners out there, has to be kind of Marla looking-ish. I want to see a Marla cosplay. You know, we'll see like at comic book conventions, people going and finding some of the most obscure characters in comics to cosplay, to put on the costume and play those characters for a day. I have yet to see a Marla cosplay. And my fear is, Matthew, that if someone did do a Marla cosplay, they'd probably mistake him.
Old Ultra Boy.
No, not old Ultra Boy. I'm thinking of the Aquaman equivalent from SpongeBob SquarePants.
Oh, Mermaid Man?
Mermaid Man.
Oh my God. Oh, you're a terrible human being.
No, but I want to see somebody. I tell you what, I will get a pretty good prize, like a really good prize.
Like a no prize.
No, not a no prize. This will be something that I will ship to your door.
A yes prize.
A yes prize for the first person who can send me a excellent Marla cosplay.
Marla looks like he might be a Florida man. I think NATO could do this.
Nate's not old enough. That's the problem.
Little fin.
I'm talking about let's get a 75-year-old to dress up like Marla and send it to me. Podcast at naturespoilers.com.
There you go.
Yeah, the problem is Nate already has the prize that I kind of have picked out, but I will still figure something out and get a really cool prize to that first person who can send me a really good Marla cosplay. But I mean, you have to be an old person. You can't be like a 10-year-old putting a grease paint in your hair.
Don't put grease paint in your hair. Use thin zinc oxide. It works better. And secondly, what is an old person? We're almost 50.
I know, which is why I said 75-year-olds.
If you enjoy the show, we would appreciate your support. You can find out more and become a Legion Clubhouse member at patreon.com/majorspoilers.
The other thing that is so listeners, I've got a special treat for you. In Superboy 147, they also have not only the origin of the Legion of Superheroes, they actually have a text story called The Lore of the Legion, and Matthew is going to entertain us with his reading rendition of The Lore of the Legion.
And lo, do we read from the Book of Legion, chapter 147, and thus it was wrote. The Legion made its initial appearance in a Superboy story in adventure number 247. Naturally, the story was called The Legion of Superheroes. In it, Saturn Girl, Cosmic Boy, and Lightning Lad went back in time to Smallville, where they recruited Superboy for a Legion tryout. He was rejected, but this turned out to be part of the test. When he demonstrated he could take the disappointment, he was accepted. No Legionnaire has had more hard luck than Lightning Lad. In adventure number 304, he was actually killed in action, though some claim he was only in a death-like trance. Finally, a way was found to revive him, but it required the sacrifice of another life, Chameleon Boy's pet Prody, who gave his life to bring L-Lad back from the dead. Chameleon Boy replaced his pet with another protoplasmic creature from the same world and dubbed that animal Prody 2. Prody 2 later joined the Legion of Super Pets. More trouble came Lightning Lad's way when he battled the Moby Dick of space, a behemoth creature which altered his bolts and hurled them back at him, destroying his right arm. For a time, Lightning Lad carried on with a robot arm, but tried to find a doctor who could grow him a new arm. One doctor, Hanscom, proved to be a 100% certified rat. He placed L-Lad in his power and forced him to commit crimes as the villainous Starfinger. Finally, Lightning Lad had the good fortune to fall into the hands of the fiendish Evillo. Working for this arch criminal was a doctor who hated his vicious master master and had found a way to restore lost limbs. 2 other unfortunate Legionnaires were aided by the same medic, Bouncing Boy, who had lost his power in a lab experiment, had it restored, and Matter Eater Lad, who had been turned fat by a weird ray during a previous case, regained his trim figure. Lightning Lad was the first of 3 Legionnaires to die in action. The second was Triplicate Girl, but only one of her 3 bodies was killed, so she survives as Duo Damsel. Feral Lad sacrificed himself to save the galaxy from the dreaded Sun Eater. He carried a bomb into the core of the thing and set it off, thus destroying the menace and himself. 3 persons have been offered Legion membership and turned it down. The first was Stone Boy of the Legion of Substitute Heroes. This club of Legion rejects, organized by Polar Boy, had operated secretly for some time, filling in when the regular Legion was away from Earth. When the superheroes learned about the subs, they held a contest to give one of them a chance to join the Legion. Stone Boy, who can turn to stone, won, but declined the honor because he wanted to stick by his fellow subs. Dev-M was the next to reject membership in the Legion. Born on Superboy's homeworld, Krypton, he had escaped its destruction in a special bomb shelter which he converted into a spaceship. At first, he was a villain, but later, after traveling into the future, he reformed and became a lawman. He turned down Legion membership to take a job as an agent in the Interstellar Counterintelligence Corps. Finally, we come to Lone Wolf. Bryn Londo, a scientist son from the planet Zune, had been brainwashed into thinking he was an android, so he refused Legion membership because he believed he wasn't human. Later, the Legionnaires helped him recover his identity, and he has a standing offer to join the Legion. He'll do so under the name Timberwolf very soon, and give the Legion the benefit of his super strength and acrobatic skill. There are other supergroups in the 30th century. One is made up of the superheroes of the planet Lalor, who are all mutants. Once they had a run-in with the Legion through the conniving of a villain who hoped to get the new heroes to destroy the Legionnaires. Later, one of the heroes of Lalor, Beast Boy, who could change into any animal, gave his life to save a child from a monster. The surviving Lalorian superheroes are Duplicate Boy, who can duplicate any other hero's power, Gas Girl, who can change into any form of gas, Evolvo Lad, who can devolve into a lower form of life or evolve into a super-brained boy of the future, and Life Lass, who can give temporary life to inanimate objects. Some Legionnaires have either resigned or been expelled. Of these, 3 have been readmitted. Starboy, who was expelled for breaking the code against killing, Dream Girl, who resigned after joining the Legion under false pretenses, and Bouncing Boy, who lost his powers for a time. Other former Legionnaires include Command Kid, who had the power to create illusions, but only because his body had been taken over by a demonic entity of his world, which was driven out by the other superheroes. Dynamo Boy, a crook who fooled the Legion into thinking he had real superpowers, and Nemesis Kid, who could adapt himself to fight any one foe, but turned out to be a traitor. One thing about the Legion, it always keeps changing. For instance, in number 367, the superheroes get a new clubhouse. Among the things to watch for in the near future are the return of Lone Wolf and another look at the adult Legion with Feral Lad's twin brother as a member. And that's only the beginning.
Adventure Comics number 369, Mordru the Merciless. Published June 1968. Written by Jim Shooter with art by Kurt Swan from Shooter Layouts. Magic returns to the galaxy, but with it comes the most dangerous foe the Legion has ever faced.
Adventure Comics 369 introduces Mordru the Edgelord.
Mordru the Merciless.
Oh,
and I will tell
Mordru the Dark Lord.
I'll tell you, the splash page of 369
Oh, creepy, right?
is terrifying.
I mean, imagine Alan Moore staring back at you.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And this is, of course,
Smiling.
Kurt Swan. This is Kurt Swan, but it's actually inked by Jack Abel. And Abel we haven't seen Abel, I think, inking Swan in Legion before. Previously, we'd seen him mostly with George Klein.
Right. We had talked about that on the previous Legion Clubhouse.
Yes, and this is just detailed, horrifying Alan Moore smiling at you and looking at you. And it's as if the director told him, hey, I want you to give me a look that says, I ate your butterfly collection and also kidnapped your mom.
Yeah.
And he nails it.
So this is an interesting story because this is a tale that has a flashback that we have never seen before. This is not a tale that we have. This is not a tale where the Legion has encountered Mordru before, because in this flashback, we are introduced to how the Legion trapped him in a airless container, a long time ago. But then as, who is this? Lightlass? No, this is
Shadowlass.
Yeah. And the only reason he escapes is because Shadowlass is taking a tour around the new facility, and she comes across the vault that he's stored in and accidentally lets a little air in, and he escapes. And then we get the backstory of Mordru, and now he's chasing down the Legion of superheroes and is going to kill them all.
First rule: give your new people orientation and enough information to train your new people, Legionnaires. You can't just throw somebody in. I mean, I've been training somebody for like the last year, it seems like. And the first thing you want to do is maybe point out the vault that no one should ever open.
Yeah, or at least put a big warning sign. Warning, do not open. Right? Evil wizard inside that will kill us all. Do not open. This includes you, Shadowlass.
Tasmia Malor, which actually we learn in this issue that her name is Tasmia Malor.
Yes, this is, and we've also learned, and this, again, somewhat problematic. We've talked before about how she was going to be the first black hero, or the first black member of the Legion of Superheroes. And
she was conceptualized as, yeah.
Yeah, and that becomes a little interesting, because one way that the Legion decide that they're going to get away from Mordru so he can't find them is to escape into the past of Superboy's Smallville, a la 1968.
Well, this is, remember,
this is even before. This would be like, wow,
yeah,
even
Smallville
before.
Is 10 years in the past of the present of
so
whatever's
this is 1958.
going on. So this is 58, yep.
And so they jump back and they're like, oh, yeah, you can pretend to be Farmer Brown's cousin, and you can be the sheriff's long-lost niece, and you got blue skin. What we going to do?
Yep. So they use some of that magical DC Universe makeup to basically change her skin tone to pink. And I will give them credit. I don't know if it's intentional, because, my copy of this book is 50 years old.
Right.
But it really looks like, from panel to panel, Tasmia's skin color looks pinker and less realistic than some of the other Caucasian skin tones that we see on the page.
And it might be. I don't know. They do pass her off as a foreign exchange student, I think. And that's fine. But one thing that is interesting is that, and I don't know, again, if this is Jim Shooter kind of being hip with the times or what, but for Black Americans living in the 1950s and 60s, a lot of times, many of them had to do what was called passing for white.
Yes.
And I don't know if that's what he's trying to do here or not. And this would be light-skinned black people who people would mistake for white. They're just like, oh, you got tan skin, or you're Italian, or whatever, which is also a horrible thing to just say, oh, well, you're Italian. But that was something that happened for a lot of people. And that also had to, we've explored this topic in a number of Major Spoilers podcast episodes when we were looking at trade paperbacks, especially a series called Incognito that people should check out. Yeah. And there's also this fear that I'm going to be found out at any minute that I am not white, and these people are going to go and lynch me. And that's kind of what is going on here. Is Shadowlass is like, people are going to find out who I am. There's an incident where they all meet up to school, and some of her makeup brushes off, and they can see the blue skin underneath. And Clark has to think fast and go, oh, let me squirt this other guy with my ink pen and say, oh, I've got a leaky ink pen. That must have been what happened. And this is a constant fear for her, that I thought at one point they were going to wake up and her pillow was going to be covered with the makeup. And she's living with she's not living with Lana. Yeah, she's staying with Lana Lang.
Right.
And I really thought that they were going to have to deal with some of more of those issues. But you can kind of sense for her that she is afraid of what's going to happen next if people find out who she is. Not just this fear of Mordru, but the fear of the populace.
Yeah, making a mistake that will have her discovered, by the people of Smallville and or Mordru, which I think is pretty strong in terms of characterization, especially in 1968. And I really enjoy the quick thinking. I mean, it's a very Silver Age dumb conceit of, oh, well, how are we going to pull this? Oh, fountain pen, blue
Right.
ink, right? But then you have to ask yourself, who has powder blue fountain pens? Who has those? And the answer is Superboy has those. Shut up and relax and read the comic.
Yeah. There's also a weird, and again, going back for the passing for White, there's a moment when Clark first introduces his fellow Legionnaires to his family, and Martha Kent like has a freak out. Like, I'm wondering if she has a little bit of racism in her.
A girl
she's
with
like,
blue skin.
Good heavens, a girl with blue skin. And it's just like, I wonder if she would react that way if this person, as we've talked about, were actually black. Yeah.
Black, yeah. That's an interesting kind of subtext to take here, especially knowing that Shooter's intentions were to make her black. Was this story conceptualized at a time when his thought process was still that Tasmia was going to have black skin?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's interesting. It's definitely something that gives the book a little bit of an undertone that you wouldn't normally have, sort of a subtext there.
And I like this. I don't know. Again, I don't know if this is part of the Red Scare because we look at a lot of movies of the time. Well, even today, because there's a series called The Americans, where there are these Russian spies that are pretending to be, normal Americans. And I kind of get that kind of vibe here where it's like, we are all undercover. We have to hide. We cannot let anyone even have a little inkling that we are different. Even Lana Lang, even Pete Ross, who are both aware of the Legion of Superheroes. Yeah.
And Lana, I think, is less of an issue because Lana does not know Superboy's secret identity.
Right.
But unbeknownst to him, Pete does, which becomes important, I believe, next issue.
Next issue, yes.
But it's interesting to see Pete trying to work under that. And it's really interesting to me. I really appreciate the fact that when they're all coming up with secret identities, we get the return of Bob Cobb, Fuller Brush salesman.
Isn't that just an awesome callback? Now, I'm pretty sure that Shooter did not create Bob Cobb, right?
No, Bob Cobb was from Superboy number 88.
Yeah, from Superboy's older brother.
Yeah, from that actual first appearance of Mon-El back in 1959 or 1960.
So to do a callback like that is just brilliant.
It is nicely done. And, he's even wearing the hat. Bob Cobb wore a little 50s style Mickey Mouse hat that I think was kind of nice. And one other thing happens in this issue that kind of surprises me, but maybe an indication of Shooter kind of expanding what we expect of the Legionnaires. There's a point where we almost see a car crash.
Right.
And Triplet Girl, Luornu, is like, I'm going to save them. She grabs the school sign and chucks it under one of the trucks. And it's heavy enough and strong enough that it literally pushes that truck, ramps the truck up off to the side. So rather than a car crash, we just have one wrecked truck and one badly injured driver. But if you look at that thing and how big it is and how thick it is and the way that truck flips, it's clearly made of concrete, which seems to be an indication that Triplicate Girl or Duo Damsel has enhanced strength.
I would say that my guess is most of them.
Women.
Yes. At this point, only 2 women. Previously, she had the strength of 3 women, but, Computo. I would say that most of the Legion members have some kind of enhanced strength. Maybe not Brainiac, maybe not Chameleon Boy, maybe not Bouncing Boy, but I would say they all have some kind of an enhanced strength. And it might be, like you said, she has the strength of 2 women because of that, or this is just a fairly light sign that has some good rigidity to it.
And they do also call back Luornu's crush on Superboy with Clark kind of going, hey, I never realized Duo Damsel was so pretty. Yeah. I'm like, oh, maybe. And Luke could have had a chance.
Of course, Lana's not pleased with that.
No, Lana's not pleased with anything. Remember, Lana's entire existence at this point is proving that Superboy is Clark Kent.
Right.
And then jealously, taking him to the sock hop. Lana at this point is basically teenage Lois, and by 1959, 1960, Lois was all about, I'm going to reveal Superman's secret identity and also marry him.
There's also just this really weird, I don't know, I want to say that it has to have some repercussions of Red Scare era mentality, because Mordru does show up and he sends this dark shadow across the town, which makes me think of The Mist. And we see these great art pieces where the people are bathed in shadow and light. It's some great art, but you just see this feeling of dread and this feeling of we are under control. In fact, even Lana, at one point, I don't know if it's in this issue or the next issue, she becomes an agent of Mordru.
Yes, Mordru uses her eyes to view.
I am Mordru's eyes. Mordru will know what I saw. He will come. And it's just like, oh my God,
the great pumpkin will come. No, wait, that's Linus.
It is creepy as heck when she is under Mordru's power. In fact, most of the town is put under Mordru's powers. But that comes at the very, very end of this issue, because first, Superboy and the rest of the Legionnaires can't be using any of their powers to stop crime, because that would be a dead giveaway. And so some mobster somewhere else in town is just like, hey, there's no Superboy in this town. Let's take over the town, see? And so
the king is taken over. Your town's in our grip, mister, and we're keeping it that way. Yeah.
What is the villain that we see later on when the new gods appear? The mobster that is using all the technology.
Boss Moxie.
No, I don't think it's Boss Moxie.
Well, there's Morgan Edge.
Nope, not Morgan Edge.
Who runs the Intergang, but it's Boss Moxie, I want to say.
I want to say Morgan Edge's. I don't think it's Morgan Edge is Intergang.
Morgan Edge is Intergang, yes.
Let me see. Who is the guy?
Boss Moxie.
I'm going to look here.
It's Boss Moxie.
No, Bruno Mannheim.
Yeah, Boss Moxie.
Bruno Mannheim. That's who this guy reminds me of.
Well, I mean, they're drawn from that broad Edward G. Robinson, kind of claw.
I just don't understand. Hey, boys, we're going to take over this town, and they just show up with some 6-shooters, and this town of 80,000 or whatever that Smallville is at this time, 10,000, is people. Just like, oh, there's 6 guys with guns. Okay, I guess we'll just do whatever you say, Mr. Mobster guy,
Mr. King.
And it's just so dopey until the Legionnaires are able to rally the town to fight these guys off with rotten vegetables.
Yep. And it works really well, and they use their powers in secret.
No, it's dumb.
A little bit of an invisible heat vision here and there. It's nice, though. And the thing about this issue that really works for me is, even with that silly aside of mobsters in their 30s chugabooms, it is just a build. It's constant building of suspense. The terror of Mordru is such that the Legionnaires, the most powerful Legionnaires, Superboy and Mon, are on the run and hiding out in the past. I mean, it's just this buildup to that final page when Mordru arrives and he's like, nah! It's scary. And the only thing the only thing that could make this issue go away was I had to go and find that picture of Mordru on the jet ski from Legends of the Superheroes in 1978.
Yes.
So that's also, something that you have to keep in mind.
I actually went to see that water show. I have probably not only pictures of that my mom has pictures of that. But I think we also have some 8mm film somewhere in the house, in my mom's house, of that show, because I was really impressed. Oh my gosh, they're on water skis. Oh my gosh, and there's the Penguin, and there's Wonder Woman doing water skis. But Mordru finds out who they are because Lana sees, I am Mordru's eyes. Mordru will know what I saw. He will come. It is just, there is a creep factor in this issue, which I find fantastic, until, of course, the mobsters show up. I just think that is a dumb little side trip. It's like, the town wouldn't have fought back. Where's the police force in this town that they're just going to roll over on?
There is no police force in Smallville. They are literally three fat men eating donuts.
Relying on Superboy.
It's basically Chief Wiggum and those 2 cops. Okay, boy, Superboy will clean this one up for us. Don't worry about it.
But this issue just ends with Mordru showing up, and he's like, I'm here, and you guys are dead.
It's a full page, horrifying Mordru looking at the reader with a Star Trek Enterprise symbol for a belt buckle for reasons unknown. And the Legionnaires throwing their hands up in abject fear. It is so good.
Yeah, because this guy can't destroy anything. He is the most powerful wizard from his wizard dimension.
So good.
And Mordru's going to stick around. I mean, don't worry, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, there will be lots of Mordru.
He's going to be here for longer than one more issue, because at this point, the stories are 2-issue arcs. We have yet to hit a 3-issue arc yet, although is some continuity that's carrying over from issue to issue to issue.
Right.
But Mordru is one of those, like the Dark Circle, like the Fatal Five, like the Time Trapper, that are going to be recurring villains for decades to come.
There will be Mordru. There will always be Mordru. Mordru lasts through the Volume 4 Legion. Mordru lasts into the reboot. Mordru, I think, even makes an appearance in the 3-boot Legion of Superheroes. Mm-hmm. Mordru is everywhere, y'all.
One other thing that I want to point out about this issue, and probably the last couple of issues, I noticed it starting to occur, is that Shooter is starting to interject the characters' real names. So instead of them calling them, "Hey, K-Kid," or "Hey, S-Boy," we're actually starting them to go, "Hey, here's Imra, here's Garth, here is Tasmia." Yeah, we're actually starting to see real names being interjected, and then in the editor's box or the narrator's box, it's like, "Hey, Imra's a real name. Imra's the real name of Saturn Girl," and that kind of stuff. So I'm really starting to like that, and I'm starting to see that happen more and more and more, to the point where in the future, that's kind of how they just talk to one another, is, "Hey, Clark," or "Hey, Mon-El," or "Hey, whatever."
"Hey, Largand of the planet Daxam." "Hello, Celine Dion."
Yeah, so I really kind of enjoyed this, even though I think Mordru is kind of a, it's a wizard. It's magic, right? I mean, Superboy can't defeat anybody with magic.
Right.
But I really enjoyed this issue a lot.
Yeah. It's definitely interesting, and it's long form plotting. It's what would become that Bronze Age storytelling, and what will eventually become the hallmark of Shooter's tenure as editor-in-chief at Marvel is just these continuing back burner plots, and you pull something out and you drag on this thread here and you pull on this over here, and this issue gives us the noodle incident with Mordru that no one ever saw but totally happened, you guys. I really like that, just that world building, even retroactive world building, where we're like, "Oh yeah, the Fatal Five has always been around. Yeah, it's fine. You're good."
We have reached the end of another Legion Clubhouse. Matthew, what did we learn this week?
We learned that the Polaris nuclear sub is 7 feet long, Stephen, but it's only $7.99.
We also got to see the Human Fly, but not the Human Fly that will appear about 6 years later. So that's kind of interesting.
A Human Fly. And we learned that Mordru, I am Mordru's eyes. Mordru will know what I saw. Mordru will know.
Exterminate, exterminate. That wraps it up for this installment of the Legion Clubhouse. Thank you so much for downloading and checking us out this week. Hey, listen, we could really use your support to keep this show going. It's just Matthew and I and Jason Inman doing this show week after week after week for you. And we enjoy doing it. And we would love to have this show continue, but we do have costs. And so if you got like $5 a month, $5 a month, that's all it would take for you to head over to patreon.com/major spoilers. Sign up at the $5 level. It'll help keep this show going and help everything that we do at Major Spoilers continue far into the future. We really rely on you, our listeners. You're our main source of funding, and we would like to see more of you sign up and join up. And if you enjoy this show, please, again, head to patreon.com/major spoilers. We greatly appreciate it. So, until next time, I'm Dorzak the Murderer.
And I'm Black Betty Bamalad.
The Legion Clubhouse is a production of Major Spoilers Entertainment, LLC, and is produced by Steven Schleicher. Your hosts were Matthew Peterson and Steven Schleicher. You can follow Matthew at Mighty King Cobra and Steven at Major Spoilers. You can follow this podcast on Twitter at Legion Clubhouse. If you have questions or comments, send them to podcast@majorspoilers.com. I'm Jason Inman. Until next time, eat it, Grandpa.
This podcast is copyright 2019 by Major Spoilers Entertainment, LLC.